Good morning and welcome to Deep Dives with New Perspective. If you like what we're presenting, please hit like, please subscribe, please share with your friends. For those of you who have recently started subscribing, thanks for joining us. We are two professional astrologers here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We offer readings, we give talks, we write on the subject, we teach extensively. My name is Michael Bartlett and
Merrylin LeBlanc. Hi, Michael.
good morning. How are you doing today?
Oh, it's a busy day. Lots of things happening, lots of interesting things happening.
And with the ruler of our solar, our sun sign being retrograde, that Saturn going retrograde is for Aquarius, a traditional ruler of Aquarius. It's been quite an interesting issue. And then when you consider that Mars and or Venus have been playing around doing the opposition with Saturn, which T-squares both of them, which empties out into Scorpio, it's really been, I would say, a full time. Maybe that's a nice way to say it.
Yes, a very nice way. Saturn actually affects me more on a home level because I have Capricorn on the cusp of the fourth house, and most of my fourth house is Capricorn, just a little bit of Aquarius. And
Where's your Saturn?
My Saturn is in the eighth house.
Okay.
But it's yes.
My partner and I both have Saturn
in all my Aquarius stuff. Yes.
Yeah. My partner and I both have Saturn in the fourth house, so his is in Capricorn, mine's in Pisces. So it's very interesting. You know, I never quite understand what is going on in life because Saturn and Pisces really doesn't, sandcastles on the beach. It's not about having a level of stability and understanding. It's about having a level of, I don't know, the closest I think I can come to it is almost like surfing, is like how to stay balanced in relationship to whatever life is presenting to me.
You're talking about Saturn in your fourth house?
Saturn and Pisces in my fourth house.
Oh, in the Pisces area. Yes. Yeah.
And owning my authority in my home, which is not easy, not giving that away to a partner or someone else, saying, hey, this will not be, especially emotionally, right? Because Saturn and Pisces.
Oh, well, my Saturn in Taurus with the in the eighth house versus the fourth. I don't really have any planets. I have an asteroid in the fourth house. But I know a friend who had considered living with me at one time, looking at both our charts, decided not to because it's pretty obvious that I rule the space I live in.
Well, and to be honest, I actually think Saturn in the fourth is that too, from what I've seen. And so, I have to admit, with having another quote, I think, especially when it's Saturn in its own sign, like Capricorn, like what Rich has, I just think, there's, how do two kings rule, or how do two queens rule? How can there be two ruling the roost, right? So I think in that kind of a category, at least how I figured it is like, how do you, divvy up? Why don't you be responsible for these parts and I'll be responsible for those parts?
Well, so what's interesting about that, which brings up, and I believe, and I don't have my ephemeris here, I don't know what happened to it. I believe that today Venus is opposite Saturn.
Yep.
In Leo.
Yep.
And what's interesting about that, because I know when you're talking about kings or queens, one of the things about Capricorn and Saturn and old astrology, it represented the queen and the king, the authority figures, which have been fading away. And when you were saying that, I was reflecting on the series The Crown that PBS did. And I believe they're in their second or third series now, or I'm not kept up with it. But Prince Philip, who passed away not too long ago as the husband of Queen Elizabeth II, it was always kind of, the way it was portrayed in that series was interesting, and probably in real life as well, because, had Greece not gone through its abolition of monarchy, he may have ended up being a king in Greece, but ended up not having that royalty and being sort of an ousted um, royal person in a way. And the
Or just
relationship,
a figurehead, right? Which also is Saturn can.
right. There was this whole kind of dynamic. I mean, what was interesting about watching The Crown was how once Elizabeth became queen, and obviously this is not necessarily totally true because it's somebody's rendition of her reign and her livelihood. But what they made pretty clear in the series was she really didn't want to be queen. Matter of fact, there was a point in which she even said, I would have been happy all my life to have just been able to be with horses and groom them and watch them run and all of that sort of thing. And yet she, and there was even an earlier scene where her sister convinced her that she should be queen and try to convince their father, and there was no way that was going to happen. um, but she was trained in the duties of the monarchy, and so there was this kind of Philip, kind, definitely recognized that, and he stuck with her. So this is an unusual relationship because in most contemporary relationships, and which you alluded to, um, it's hard to find that kind of acquiescence. And when I think about Venus opposite Saturn today, Venus isn't necessarily an acquiescing.
Especially not in Leo, right? I mean, it's not, I mean, she knows what she wants and she's going to get it. But I mean, you also have Uranus squaring this too. I mean, so, and it's
Yeah.
perfecting actually. It's 11 and 12 degrees. Venus is at 11 and Saturn is at 12.
Venus has desires and she knows what she wants,
Yes.
and she's going to get it hell or come high water. So that's
Especially with, I mean, I think especially when this is fixed. I mean, that's why, I've written a lot about it. And I think it's so worthy that we've been talking about this a couple of weeks because I think this is really powder keg energy. Mars and Venus, our ideal masculine and feminine, but also our values and our desires and our courage, how we move forward, how we relate to one another, how we have our passions in life between those two, squaring off against authority and I mean, opposing authority and squaring off against Uranus in an Aquarian way, but it's all fixed. So there's something about like letting go of these ideas because it's emptying out into Scorpio. The fourth point is Scorpio. So there's something that has to be like chewed on, processed, and released is how I keep seeing it.
Well, what's difficult in that process you just described was that this Venus is in a masculine sign and Saturn is in a masculine sign. Now, both of these planets have that ability to shift from femininity to masculinity. Saturn from Capricorn, a feminine sign, to Aquarius, a masculine sign, and Venus, from Taurus, one of her planet signs, feminine, to Libra. But it seems like these placements are going to bring out their masculinity. And what do we say about Venusian masculinity? It's the feminine. Well, you could go back to matriarchal societies, and we do in some tribal situations, even in this day, they are ruled by women, but it's the masculine energy in a woman that brings that out. So, maybe we should talk a little bit about masculinity versus femininity. It's sort of like what the action-oriented giving, maybe, versus receiving. And I always like to think about the feminine as accommodating as well as receiving, whereas the masculine is more we'll bring the we'll do the action oriented work
and to pierce into things, right? And to go into things, whereas, where women, it's like, there's an aspect of holding space, like, for giving birth.
Right. So Venus in Leo then is going to go into our leadership situations. And we are seeing women stepping forward. And the other day you sent me a message about Greta Thunberg's speech to the Austrian Environmental Assembly. I don't remember the exact name of that gathering, but she, here she was introduced. A woman was heading that assembly, and she was introduced by this woman and spoke. And she did what we would call a very masculine thing. She went into that meeting and she did not hold back.
It's also very Swedish, I have to say. There's a Swedish aspect to it. There's a
yes, I do. Yeah, knowing some Scandinavian women, I know the energy you're talking about. Scandinavian, I mean, you have relatives that are
I was an exchange student there 40 years ago, and I'm so close with the family. So I've had a 40-year-long relationship with Denmark and my Danish friends and family.
Right.
And I'm part Danish, Swedish.
On both sides, the men easily express the feminine and the women easily express the masculine. So we're not talking about male versus, we're not talking about gender at all.
No, and actually, that's really actually a great point to bring up Scandinavians in that sense, because I think they're they're actually, I mean, there are a few other countries that are like that too, but like you said, there's just a nice balance in it that is, that shows us what it can be about having the harmonized inner masculine and feminine within each of us, regardless of our sex, be more harmonized and working in a way, because sometimes we need to be more forceful as a woman, and sometimes as men, we need to be more receptive.
Right. But Greta Thunberg actually showed the masculine in a woman where she dressed them down and did it with, there in very clear, direct, concise ways. There, it was like a knife cutting through the images that they would have liked to have presented themselves.
The public shaming, is that what one would call that? I mean, it was really, I mean, on that level, I mean, it was, I think it's really interesting too. And I don't know.
It was a public shaming, but she did it in a way that was justifiable. Because
well, that's that Scandinavian way. I mean, they can tell you how to go screw yourself with a smile on their face, and you walk away going, wait a minute, what just happened? And it's like, but it makes you think. And that's really their point, is like, hey, you guys, you said this is what is happening. These two do not equal. Because here in the West, we've been able to live with this bizarre cognitive dissonance. And to be honest, that's what a T-square kind of does, right? Is it has to break up a certain level of cognitive dissonance, especially when it's in the fixed signs.
Yes, tell me about it.
Yeah, right. But when you think of Saturn with tradition and Mars and Venus, our passions and our attitudes, and Uranus up there going, say, come on, you guys, let's break it do. It's in Taurus, let's break through and have new form. And then Scorpio's going, what the hell are you guys all fighting about? You guys are all full of BS. Just let it go. Right? There's this element of like we have to let go of the past and these antiquated ways of doing things that do not serve us. And I think that applies to the most personal things in our lives, all the way up to the global things in our lives collectively. And that's what I think this T-square is really kind of lining up. It's like saying, hey, you guys, you know what? Oh, you want to play this game? Okay, we'll play this game. We'll let it ratchet up a bit. Look what's going on in Brazil. The Brazilian president, screwing around with vaccines for people. The people have had it. People are dying by the thousands every single day. There's a level of poverty in the favelas that's
Well, that's been there forever. I mean,
and needs to change. I mean, also like, oh my God, some of that real estate is just gorgeous. Go in there and give those people proper homes. Go in there, give them power, give them water.
I toured is not the best word, but was shown the favelas back in the early 70s, and nothing has changed in Rio since for decades, and yet I'm going to go back to Greta. I mean, she's just talking about hey, you said this a year or two ago, and you've done nothing. You've just given lip service.
That's what I love. She really basically said, you guys are just sure, there are new leaders involved, alluding, I think, very clearly to the US, but it's just, she says, it's basically a window dressing. You guys have just changed your window dressing, saying your policies changed, but meanwhile you are silly. And it's true, we're still doing all these oil leases,
the hard work that has to be done, and this goes to like Saturn and big organizations. Just take the automobile, for example. We have to say, I mean, her parents switched to an electric car when she started talking about what she was aware of. Well, what governments, or even in taking here, how are we Americans being forced to go to non-oil generated cars? How are we being forced to go to alternative transportation?
We're not. All the tax incentives are still there for gas and oil. But it's actually, what's really funny is I actually do know this about what that happened a few years ago when Tesla first came out. The Danish government was so excited at the idea of doing electric vehicles that they offered all the individuals who bought them to get them tax-free.
Wow.
Which is unheard of in Denmark. I mean, everything is so horribly taxed. I mean, an average vehicle will typically run you a few $100,000 US.
Right.
Just to purchase.
Add to that, they're horribly taxed because they invest in human lives.
Exactly. Yeah.
They have
very clearly
healthcare for all. Right. They have one of the best retirement systems in the whole world.
Schooling.
Yes, education. Anytime in your life you decide you want to go back and learn something, you can be at.
When you want to have a kid, both parents get to have time off for, it's
child care for working
family
parents.
leave. It's not paternal or maternal. Yeah, and so they actually, the Tesla thing was so successful that they actually had to stop it because they were losing so much revenue and so many people. I mean, so you can't throw a rock in Denmark without hitting a Tesla. It's just really a great plan. But like you said, there's no incentives here. But even like here, I know, like trying to get solar panels for my house for so many years, all the loopholes I had to jump through to finally get it, they don't just readily make it available, even though we live in a place that has 300 days of sunlight a year. It's like a no-brainer. Every single one of our homes should have solar panels on it to protect it. And I'm an all-electric home. Why aren't there incentives? The incentivization happens for the wealthy. And that's the stuff that really has to change. Just, how much money do the wealthy need to have? And how much do the other people have to pay for the rights to the same things that other individuals who have a lot of money in the bank can just write a check for and make it not an issue. There's no sweat writing a $1 million check for certain individuals. Whereas like for some people, writing a check for $10 or $15 is really painful. How do we reconcile that? That shouldn't be the case.
Mm-hmm. So there's the value side of not only the value side of Venus, but also what are the preferences. And when it comes to large segments of the world society, at least those that have most of the power, there isn't that value. There isn't that they either you know that you have to reach a point of disconnecting to um, to the way we look at wealth, the way we look at riches. I mean, wealth can be many things that has nothing to do with material stuff um, or money, but we actually are where we're at due to a lack of it's a kind of education, but it's not your typical left brain education. It's really an education of the whole person. And so, like when we talk about Scandinavian countries, for example, in our realm of talking about the soul and spirituality, these are advanced people. These are people that are looking at life from a higher level, from a higher perspective. I mean, there are people at lower perspectives, I don't know how to language this, um, who are religious or spiritual people, but have maybe not evolved to see that in the human life. And when I read about people's near death experiences and they talk about what might be called heaven or something, you really get a glimpse of the fact that we're not operating here on this planet, we humans are not operating on that level. It's maybe that's why there's reincarnation.
So and why so many people fear death. Why so many people fear death, right?
Yes.
Because there's something in them that must be saying like, hey, you know what? You're not quite doing what you're here to do. And I mean, to be honest, I love that because that's, leads right into astrology. If there's anything that helps us understand that is astrology, being able to see what someone's soul's purpose is or what, how someone's makeup is and what they're doing. And also the ways that maybe it's being negated because of family or society or friends that aren't.
Or how their minds work. Yeah.
Yeah. Because we have to, I mean, and that's, where, times like this, where these astrological functions, if someone, people with planets in Scorpio are probably feeling very full right now because, with that T-square filling right in there, there's a lot of energy. And, these are the times that bring people to astrology because life doesn't really make sense. Like, what's going on? Why, I'm trying this and this, but I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall, especially Mars, Uranus, right? Mars, Uranus, Saturn. If that isn't a banging your head against the wall kind of a symbol, I don't know what is. But what do they say? A definition of crazy is doing the same thing every day, expecting a different result. That, to be honest, I think is like this, this T-square in the fixed signs. The fixed signs want to do the same thing every single day and get a different result because they're working towards something, but it's like, no, sometimes things have to be, what do you call it? Elevated. They have to evolve. That's where Uranus is really such a great energy in this sense. Like, right, how do we make this into something that really works? Not that just like gives lip service. Like you said with Greta, like we see with these presidents, these leaders around the world, there's all this lip service while they're just raking in this money, as opposed to like, hey, you know what? I have enough. I also want to make sure my people are taken care of.
It's sort of an image of an empty soul that feels like, that feels the void, but doesn't realize that it has to be filled with something of that the soul takes as a something it can receive. Instead, it fills it with material stuff. The soul isn't material.
No, I mean, that's what's,
Although they did show in a movie many years ago that when a person dies, what was it, 9 grams or something like that, or 7, I forget.
26 grams.
Where they, no, it
26
wasn't
grams,
that
yeah.
many.
It's
That
just
that
not even an
that
ounce.
they weighed the body before and after the person was, died, and it weighed less. And they figured that must be, they made a movie about it, the title of the movie was either 9 or 7 grams, and basically they figured that's the weight of the soul. It's just like if you could take air and put it in a container and change the weight of it.
It's also, when you think about it, well, I mean, you think about it, you sit and you watch a movie, it's sound and it's visual, and just think about how enraptured we get in a movie. But in life, we have that, plus we have smell, plus we have taste, plus we have our emotions. So it's really easy. I love, the ancient Sanskrit word is the Maya, right? The illusion of life. It fills us like, oh my gosh, look at, there are chocolates over here. Oh my God, I love chocolates. And you spend your life eating chocolates and you forget, oh, I wasn't supposed to eat chocolates this lifetime. Like, oh my God, they were so good, And then you get diabetes and you pass away early, and okay, next lifetime, you're like, okay, maybe not gonna eat chocolate this lifetime, but then there's something else you learn about. But each of these lifetimes, I feel like we have these ways of like learning the rights and the wrong ways that our, like you say, like our soul needs in order to be. We listen more, like we learn to listen to the knock at the door when our soul is speaking to us, so that it doesn't have to become a pounding, or what, to be honest, I really think happens, because I see this signature with the Uranus. Whenever I see Uranus and Mars involved with each other, I always think of accidents, or a sickness that makes one have to wake up to a different reality. Like you said, the people who do have near-death experiences, they come back and they totally reformat their lives, because they know that like what we're like, quote, working towards here in this life has nothing to do with what all of life is about. And how do we bring those two things back into alignment with one another?
Yeah. Amazing. All of that out of Venus opposite Saturn.
And Uranus squaring. Well, I mean, the T-square with
Uranus
the T-square, the fixed
is
T-square.
squaring both. Yeah. Yeah.
And what Scorpio has to do, which is like, has to chew on it, has to process it and let it go. Right? Don't hold on to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's basically looking for, I mean, I always think of Scorpio more as looking for a connection, a connection to whatever, and if you're talking about individuals' charts, you'd have to look at that area of the chart. And it's not, often it's a connection where the biggest lesson for Scorpio is to surrender the ego. And so what, to have that area filled, one has to not be engaged in getting it filled with one's ego.
And if there's anything that can help it, is that T-square right now, I think. Oh, you think you're important? Oh, we'll show you how important you are.
It's sort of like you might want some, you might want a new car, new furniture or something. And yet it might be that what you really are being offered is a relationship that is worth, the worth can't even be compared or measured to those things, to that car, that house, that whatever. Yeah. That's a Scorpio, this water sign, that takes us, the water signs in a way take us closer to the soul world, SOUL. And they're more psychological, and consequently, non-material. Material things trigger that energy.
Well, especially security, if it affects security, right? Which especially Cancer and Scorpio respond to.
Right. But yes, I'm thinking with Cancer, it's sort of like the security is really, maybe a mother or a father who really listens to you and inspires you and loves you, and not in, any kind of physical way. It's just something there's a bond there that's emotional. And yet if you're, if instead you're substituting a house and furniture, et cetera, to that, well, yeah, I mean, it's not going to work. You're still going to have that void that wants to be filled.
And I think, that's one of the things with, I think, the fixed signs, because we can get really determined and set in our ways. And sometimes there just needs to be a little, the ox cart needs to be upset. We need to be shown that, hey, maybe those tires were actually really bald and they weren't safe. Sometimes, I know if you have this happen sometimes, where you go out to your car and you see like that you have a flat and you go like, oh, darn, that's really bummer. And you realize like, oh, but the nice thing is it's here at home. It didn't happen while you're driving along the freeway, at 90 miles an hour or something like that. It's just, to me, and I don't know, it's also maybe my sad rise, and I'm also always this eternal optimist, like, well, at least that didn't happen,
Could have been way worse.
Right, but that's like with this setting, with these energies right now, it's like, kind of like nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, and it's like, I just think, people should be expecting the unexpected, and finding ways to, be at peace with it. I mean, it's an intense month, and I think, we're needing to learn, especially I think as, most of us here in the United States are coming out of the pandemic, how to relate to people once again, and giving up our fixed ideas of things, because we aren't living in our homes anymore, we're outside. The amount, I think there's been something like a 2,000% increase in complaints on airlines from people just basically losing it on the planes. I mean, people don't know how to behave anymore because they've been living with themselves and with their families and getting away with their personal behaviors, and they think they can take it out in the real world again.
That's really scary. That's really immature. Very immature.
Yeah. All right. How can people find you?
Moonwiseastrology.com. And there you can find contact information like Merrylin LeBlanc at gmail.com, or Moonwise at ksfr.com, where I do a Moonwise show once a week on Saturdays. It's a podcast there. So yes. Yeah. Great.
And you can find me at coremichael.com. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. And again, please, if you like this, hit the like button, share with your friends, subscribe. Please leave comments. It's great to see what you guys are thinking. If there's a certain topic you want us to review, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much and have a great day. Bye.
Bye.